Welcome to Chapter 10, Spirituality in a Secular Profession. Looks like the camera is having a little trouble capturing a good picture, so I'm hoping that the audio will come through so you'll be able to hear what it is I have to say. I'm just going to be highlighting a few things in this chapter. One of the first things we want to point out is that oftentimes the words religion and spirituality are used interchangeably. For the purpose of our discussion, we want to look at the fact that there are some differences. And at the very beginning of the chapter, Edward Kanda puts forth a definition for both religion and spirituality. Be sure you read those and you note the distinctions. He talks about religion in terms of it being organized, in terms of it being in social institutions like a church, a synagogue, a mosque, that there's traditions, things that are repeated over time. And in terms of spirituality, it talks more about a personal quest for wanting to know oneself and relationship with others and moral relationship with others and with the universe. And as more, I think the words he used is a sense, a search for meaning and the sense of life. So be sure to read each of those descriptions and to realize that they are distinctive. When we talk about religion or spirituality, it is evident from polls that have been done in the country that America is a very religious and in some respects spiritual country. I think one of the most recent Gallup polls showed that about 92 to 97% of people say that they believe that there is a higher power or that there is a God. And 87% of those people say that religion plays a meaningful role in their life. Now, how that's expressed, can vary greatly, but that's what people, when they're asked, that they're reporting. So by and large, across the country, people do believe in a higher power or a God, and they believe that it has a meaningful role in their life. How that role is defined is going to really vary from, person to person. And when we talk about the breakdown in terms of the demographics, the country, the largest group by far, although there's many different branches of it, is Christianity. That makes up, I think, about 76%, or about 160 million people, who identify themselves as Christian. That's a broad definition, but they identify themselves as Christian. You should take note that the next largest group is not actually any particular religion. It's actually people who are non-believers. They're atheists. They're secular people. They don't have a particular belief in a God or a higher power. That's about 13 or so percent. Then after that, you have many other religions, Jewish, Muslim, Buddhism, Taoism, Wiccan, many, many other religions, but they make up a much smaller percentage of the overall population. Now, in the historical context, it's important and interesting to note that social work, when it was evolving from a volunteer movement into an occupation and then into a profession, but especially in the beginning, it really had its roots in religion, both in Christianity and Judaism. And so that is the history. The motivation came from those religious roots. But over more recent times, in the 1950s and in the 1960s, when social work began to develop from an occupation into a profession, it began to move away from those spiritual roots until it came to the point where religion or spirituality wasn't something that was really discussed or part of the social work profession, which is odd because social work really does value diversity and really has an important place in terms of saying a social worker needs to be culturally competent. A social worker needs to be aware of the populations that they work with, of their culture and all of its various aspects, except for religion. And in part, trying to seek the status of some of the other kind of high-level professions like law and medicine. It is one, social work as a profession is kind of moved more towards science as opposed towards faith or religion or spirituality being a part of it. But in the most recent of times, this has come back into the discussion because, as many people realize, religion or spirituality can play a very important role in some clients' life. Now, if some of those clients are in that 13%, they don't have a belief in God, they don't believe in the divine, it's just what is here and now, well then, that doesn't apply to them. But for many, many other people, and to varying degrees, religion and spirituality plays a very significant role in their life and in their worldview. And to completely ignore it and to be afraid to have it part of the discussion and part of the plan and part of the approach is something I'm glad that we're once again talking about, because it needs to be brought back in its proper place and in its proper balance. Now, I want to say too that this fellow named Lowenberger talks about social workers and their own kind of where do they stand in terms of religion and spirituality. And Lowenberg breaks it down into three types when he talks about social workers. Type 1 is the social worker who has no formal religious affiliation. It might be atheist, agnostic, humanistic, and doesn't really see any particular place where religion is playing or spirituality a role in their life. The second type Lowenberg talks about are the social workers who do maintain a affiliation with a religious group, organization, a formal structure within the society, but they see that as separate. That's something that's in their personal life and in their private life, but it's not to be a part of their social work practice. And then there is a third type of social workers who are affiliated with religious groups, and they have more of a holistic approach. They believe that their spirituality or their religion also influences and informs them in their professional practice as well as in their private life. So Lowenberg is saying that even among social workers, there are differences. We need to know those, and we also need to respect those, as we would also do with our clients. All right, that's part 1. Turn back into part 2, and I have a few other comments that I'd like to highlight in this chapter. As always, be sure to read every bit of each chapter. Pay close attention to the words that are in italics. Those are key words. And in the back of each chapter are some of the keywords actually listed all together in the keywords and concepts.